Well, welcome everybody. This is the new MDs, moms, doctors, and scientists working together to heal our children. Alexis Baden-Mayer, our host and MC, will be back with us in just a minute. Today, we're going to be talking about obesity. Obesity is one of America's epidemics. Of course, it's a problem around the world, but apparently in America, it is much more prevalent than in other places around the world. And most of us would think it's particularly about the food, but we're going to be talking about many other issues today as well. Ever since humans learned to make, sugar, mill grain, and fermented alcoholic beverages, gluttony has been a problem, and diet-related diseases have been an issue. And current obesity crisis are different from other generations and from other countries around the world. Everybody knows that. We can see in America. I think, Michelle, it's something about 54% of people in America are overweight or have obesity issues.
It's close to 50%, and it's in the 40%, and that's for adults. And children are approximately 20%. It varies by age a little bit, by which state they live in, and their ethnicity matters as well. But kids were averaging approximately 20%, adults approximately 40% obesity.
Right. Yes. And as a mother, I was particularly, happy about this panel because I don't know about you, but anybody who's been a mother has gained some weight. I gained 50 pounds for my first child, 60 pounds for my second. And for me, the food was the primary issue to be able to lose that weight. I lost 16 pounds in 6 weeks going gluten-free with no exercise. But many of my family members did not lose weight and are still dealing with the issue today. And that leads to sleep apnea, snoring, all kinds of other health issues, diabetes, which we're going to be talking about today. And you will see as an American, even if you don't have obesity or being overweight in your family as an issue, you see it when you go out in America. You see images, let's just say, of what the beach looked like in the 1950s, right? I think we have an image of that. What did the beach look like in the 1950s, Corey? Do we have that image? No.
Not really.
There we go. Yes. We go. So that's what it looked like in the 1950s at the beach. And then what about today? What does it look like at the beach today? Yeah, it's a little different. And, we are seeing something different at the beaches today. And we would primarily think that is because of food. And if you take a look at the food supply, we have some images of our lovely grocery store aisles, what that looks like. Yes, we do. We've got tons of sugary cereals. We've got all kinds of candies and especially right near the grocery store checkout line. We've got all kinds of sodas that have tons of high fructose corn syrup and food dyes. And syrup, blue maple syrup, folks, come on. What are we feeding our children? And again, the cereal aisle is just loaded with sugar, of course, candy. And obviously, the food supply is a major issue. Michelle, can you tell us specifically why? And I'm sure Stephanie Seneff will chime in. Specifically, why are these food dyes and chemicals in the food supply a problem for obesity?
Oh, there's such a problem. And let's just look into the food, because food is still the major problem, but these foods have no nutrient value. That's why cereals have to add all those artificial vitamins and minerals back in, because they're all stripped out. So those are really industrial food-like products. They're not real food, labeled as food. So the first thing you can do is get rid of the cereals, people. We'll just tell you what to do starting now. And they're expensive. In our local supermarket, a box of cereal was $6. Really? Are you kidding me? So number one, there's no nutrient density. Number two, the colorants and the additives are toxicants. Those are neurotoxicants, the blue dyes, the red dyes. As a matter of fact, great data on there. We can go down that rabbit hole later. And there are other additives in there, various preservatives and emulsifiers that kill off your microbiome. How many times the new MDs, we will be tackling the microbiome ad nauseum. Hopefully maybe not a good choice of words ad nauseum for today's topic, but upsetting the microbiome. And of course, and Stephanie could go about a couple of days on this topic. All these foods have glyphosate-based herbicides, Roundup being the most common, but there are many. And so this is a toxic nightmare of non-food. This is not real food. folks. So that is one of the things. And as Zen will tell you, we feed it to our kids at lunch, so they're having it for breakfast, at their school lunches, and if parents are doing takeout for dinner through the McDonald's drive-through, they're doing it for dinner. So that's what our American children are eating. Because there's no nutrition, kids are constantly hungry. Think their body wants more food because they're not receiving any nutrients. So despite being overweight, they are overfed and undernourished, and that's the issue.
And the big issue for me is that these children that are now overweight, and adults as well, they develop complexes, right? They develop insecurities and a lack of confidence. And today being Valentine's Day, I just want to put a shout out to everyone to, incorporate self-love into your life, whether you are overweight or not, or underweight, whatever it is. There's a lot of reasons why you might be overweight that should not involve shame. Okay, I'd really love for everybody to take that on today. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're dating or in a relationship or right or happy or not. You can absolutely turn that around for yourself, especially when you understand all the different reasons that you could be overweight from today's show. I think you're going to be very surprised. Do we have Alexis back with us?
Can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay.
All right.
Retake the baton as your moderator. Thanks so much for being here with us today. All right, so it's not just these things like high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated vegetable oils, the refined sugars, the starches. I mean, those are the things we know are bad for us. That's the junk food. But it's also the toxins that are in the junk food and how those toxins interact with our bodies. Stephanie, you're the author of Toxic Legacy. You've done a deep dive into this, especially about glyphosate and how. Nice. All right, so how does glyphosate work in the body? To you two, Stephanie and Michelle, you all introduced me to the word obesogen. And I hadn't thought of toxins as obesogens before. I knew they were bad for us. But how is glyphosate an obesogen?
Right. Now, that's sort of a complicated thing to answer, but it definitely messes up the gut. And that's where it starts, because when your gut microbes are not in balance is when you can end up having this issue of being able to put on more fat much more easily and not being able to control your appetite. And I think a critical thing, in my opinion, is that glyphosate disrupts the liver's ability to detoxify fat-soluble toxins. And you have a lot of fat-soluble toxins in your food and also in your environment in many other ways, and we can go into more detail with that. Glyphosate disrupts the enzymes that turn those fat-soluble toxins into water-soluble things that can then be removed, because it needs to be water-soluble, that you can just ship it right out to the blood, right over to the kidneys and out through the urine. So it's a problem when you can't convert it to something water soluble with these enzymes like the cytochrome P450 enzymes and also the sulfation enzymes. They both get messed up by glyphosate, and I write a lot about that in my book. And then those fat soluble toxins become very toxic, and the way to fix the problem sort of is to stuff them into fat cells. And so your fat cells grow, especially around your abdomen, because that's a convenient place to just tuck them away before they can even get to the liver. Just get rid of them from the gut, and then the rest of your body is protected. It's a way to protect you from those toxins by getting fat.
Dr. Pero, you mentioned something as we were preparing for this presentation, that we have the same number of fat cells that we're born with, and that the fat cells just grow. That surprised me. So our fat cells are perhaps growing not just through the number of calories we're eating, but also as a protective mechanism. Can you expand upon that a bit, Dr. Pero?
Yeah, I think I can. We have to appreciate that any cells in our body are there for a specific purpose. It's not that by accident we have fat cells. And fat cells are actually protective, and they're metabolically active tissue. They actually protect us. And the way they protect us is they do store a lot of these various toxic substances, is one of the things they do. They also go in certain places, and then because of their metabolic activity, you don't want them in certain spots because they can contribute to things like heart disease, when the kind that sits around your middle. Men tend to have, in general, the more middle fat, and women tend to have in the lower body more of the pear shape, which is actually not as bad. But that aside, so you're born with a certain number of fat cells, and what happens is, as we overeat and you have too many calories, even carbohydrates. They're switched into fats, and those fats are stored, and these cells can grow rather large. Now, if enough stressors happen in your body, you can make more fat cells. But basically, we have a certain set for life, but it's called a dipogenesis. Dipo is fat, genesis, birth of, you can make more. And there's storage. So, for example, the way this becomes important, if someone is doing weight loss and they have a lot of body fat, as they lose their weight, the toxicants stored in that fat will do redistribution. And that's what we worry about. And now, as someone's dropping weight, they have a redistribution phenomenon. What type of those substances are? They can be plastics, they can be solvents, they can be metals. And these can be redistributed to, i.e., the brain. So we have to be wary about some of these things that we're doing. Yeah, everybody wants to take off some weight. We don't need that excess weight. So that's something to consider. So,
Michelle, real quick, can I ask?
Please.
So when somebody's getting like some type of device that is a vibrating thing that will go to the cellulite on their butt and their thighs, and they're breaking up that fat, could they be distributing toxins throughout their body at the same time? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I've actually looked into those devices because I've seen them. I think I get targeted all this kind of stuff. So I'm like, let's look at those weight loss devices. And those can stimulate movement of your fat, and you're redistributing it. So you need to have a couple of things in place. Lots of water intake, filtered water, clean water. We can go into that. And also you have to be moving to get that stuff up and out. You want those toxicants up and out. And then we can talk about, and maybe this is a little foreshadowing of new MDs to come, of detoxification methods on what to do as we are releasing these toxins and toxicants. Toxins are organic, toxicants are inorganic substances in our body. It is a big topic, no pun intended. Well, pun intended. Okay. bad. But anyway, this is really an important topic for people and eaters. Yes. Did I answer your question, Alexis? I'm kind of all over the place.
Totally did. But of course, we know we shouldn't overeat, right? We shouldn't overeat. I mean, there are toxins in the food. There's junk that we shouldn't eat. But why is it? I mean, one of the reasons why we're doing this show is because the American Academy of Pediatrics recently came out with a statement that says that we're gonna finally tackle the obesity epidemic in kids who are over 12. We should give them surgery, the surgery on their stomachs that prevents them from overeating, and we should give them drugs that deal with this overeating problem. Why is that not the perfect solution? I mean, should it be part of the solution?
Can I just add in, we should have a sound effect for dollar signs. That would be my first thing. I'm sure Michelle and Stephanie have an additional answer to that.
Do you know what companies are behind this?
Well, I'll go into health stuff, and then I'm going to pass the baton to Stephanie to give us a science breakdown. So I just want to share with our listeners that the American Academy of Pediatrics for pediatricians is the gold standard. So what they say, pediatricians will follow. So poor parents out there will go to their pediatrician with their obese child who's over 12. Their BMI is over 29, 25%. They are classified as obese. And they're going to recommend surgery and or drugs. And Stephanie and I have been, and Zen have been talking a lot about this, these procedures. Bariatric surgery in children, first of all, I nearly fell off my chair. Are you kidding me? First of all, it misses the mark of dealing with the root causes. And it's multifactorial, number one. And it's a significantly dangerous procedure. And when I went to the Cleveland Clinic website looking at bariatric surgery, there are basically two types. There were 21 potential side effects from bariatric surgery, from everything from bleeding, failed surgical issues, vitamin deficiencies, reflux, where the kids will reflux back up. So this is not a solution. And AAP, shame on you. Talk about blame and shame. It's time to shame the AAP. That is a no-no.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, let's get into number 2, and then I'm going to pass the baton to Stephanie on Wegovy. Stephanie, do you want to take the lead on this new touted the miracle drug for obesity, Wegovy?
Yes, definitely. I started noticing hype, around this new drug, Wegovy, and they're very, very excited about it, the pharmaceutical industry. Wegovy has only recently been approved for diabetes, so it's approved to treat diabetes in adults. And then I think they've just gotten approval to treat it for obesity, but they haven't gotten the insurance companies on board. So if you have diabetes, you can get the insurance to pay for this drug. But if you only have obesity without diabetes, you can't. And there's a lot of work going on now to pressure the insurance companies to also allow this drug to be paid for by the company for obesity, sort of saying obesity is a disease. It's a chronic disease, just like diabetes. You need to add it to the list of things that are approved as conditions for which the insurance pays for your disease, for your treatment of your disease. And of course, Wegovy has been priced sky high, $1,300 a month minimum is what it's costing right now. And it's a lifetime drug because as soon as you go off of it, you gain the weight right back. And that was shown in the studies. They did the studies. They lost a good part of their weight, I think 15%, something like that, these very obese people. So it works. It suppresses your appetite. It's actually a hormone-like substance. It's simulating our hormone that's produced normally by the stomach called GLP-1, glycogen-like peptide 1, GLP-1. That's the hormone that's naturally produced by the stomach that curbs appetite. And there are many conditions that are associated with defective, like the GLP-1 is suppressed in association with things like diabetes. And so many people have not enough GLP-1 being produced by their stomach, which then causes them to overeat. So really, I think it should be effortless to maintain a healthy weight. And I think it was effortless back in the past. Back when I was a kid, you almost never saw anybody who was morbidly obese. I mean, you would have stared at them. It was so unusual to see that when I was a child. And it's just that if you don't have all these exposures to these toxins, your body's healthy, your body knows when to stop eating. And of course, you also mentioned the deficiencies in the food. I think that's an important point. You're not getting a lot of, not just vitamins and minerals. They stuff vitamin and minerals additives into the cereal, but that's not the same thing as eating a food that naturally has those vitamins and minerals. And then it's not just vitamin and minerals, it's also all these phytochemicals and even chlorophyll and all these interesting molecules that are produced by plants. And of course, also the animals produce a lot of interesting molecules as well that disappear when you go through the food processing part and produce a soy protein bar, or a candy bar. All of that is gone. So these fancy foods, and of course, herbs and spices, they have all kinds of exotic polyphenols, phytochemicals, I think it's called, these sort of fancy biological molecules that actually help to support metabolism. And you're not getting those when you eat these processed foods. So it's a combination of the poisons you're exposed to and the lack of healthy nutrients that's compelling your body to overeat to solve those problems. And then that results in turning down the gain on this GLP-1, which increases your appetite. So it becomes very, very difficult not to overeat when you've got this constant drive to eat. But this Wegovy, so the Wegovy pretends to be GLP-1. And so if you're taking that constantly, what I think is happening is that it's causing your own body to stop making it. And I think when you have hormones, when you're taking hormones, your body learns that it doesn't have to make them. That's a classic feature of hormones.
It's just like the thyroid. It's just like the thyroid medication, right? Like once
exactly so. I think it's true for vitamin D as well. Actually, if you keep taking vitamin D, your body forgets to make it. So it's suppressing your body's natural ability to make the protein that hormone, which suppresses your appetite. And so then when you stop taking the drug, you're making way too little of this hormone. You're dying to eat. You just are compelled to eat, and so you gain the weight right back. So you've got to take it for your entire life. And who knows? I mean, it's going to have all kinds of interesting side effects as well that we don't yet know because it hasn't been around long enough.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
Of treating this issue, like Dr. Pero, would you, if you detected a deficiency in the glucagon-like peptide GLP-1 that Wegovy is supposed to create, are there natural ways to help someone recover this hormone?
There actually are ways to recreate better health, and it's absolutely true. When you don't want to be on anything too prolonged, the same thing is true for digestive enzymes. You'll stop making them if you take them for too long a period of time. So there's no quick fixes, and you can't remove the body's innate ability to heal itself. But in order to give the body a chance to make these things, you have to do a few things. Number one, you have to reduce the toxic load. Let's just get to some solutions right now. If your toxic load is too high, you overload your detoxification pathways, whether it's from your microbes in your gut and or your liver, and more detox pathways of that. Number two is you have to repair your inflammation in your gut, leaky gut. And we've talked about that, and we'll do another show just on leaky gut. And some of the ways you do that are to eat organic food, remove the chemical inputs, and restore the microbiome. Then you have to eat the appropriate nutrients that your body needs to make these hormones, proteins, beneficial biology in your body. You need the right nutrients. You need minerals to run these enzyme systems. You need those nutrients in whole foods. You do that, and if you remove all the food ultra processed food is just a toxic nightmare. Just stop buying it. You'll also eliminate your addiction. Food companies process these foods and make them so that they are addictive, whether it's Coca-Cola or cereal or whomever it is. They add a certain amount of salt and fat so that your body craves it, and you create actual addictions. After about 2 weeks, when you come off these things, you wake up one day, you go, wow, I'm no longer craving that, that chocolate bar, or whatever it is that you're craving. So these are addictions, and your little brain, there are these little morphine-like receptors in your brain, love these little chemicals because they're feel good. And remember, food is just information, and they change our brain chemistry. A lot of the different food substances that we eat, chocolate being one of them, being Valentine's Day. All right. It has a lot of stimulants in it, lots of feel good things in chocolate. That's where that relationship probably came from. So yes, it can be repaired. It takes time. If you think how long it took for an individual to become obese, you're not going to undo it in a 1 week, 1 month, 3 month diet. And I really do hate that word diet. I think that word should be eliminated from the English language. Just take diet out. It probably took decades to get to that state, unless it was during COVID, where people escalated up quite a bit during COVID, short of COVID. And so you have to give your body a chance. And I'm thinking 1 to 3 years to regain homeostasis. It takes time. You want to go for the marathon, not a sprint. And your brain has to reset also as you redistribute your weight and redistribute your satiety, and all that has to recalibrate. It takes time. And as we age, it even takes longer. So you have to be gentle and patient and go for the marathon, not the sprint.
But
can I add something, Alexis, about Big Pharma wants a marathon, though. They want lifetime prescriptions to these children. And just to bring some numbers in from the CDC, 14.7 million children and adolescents are now experiencing, 19.7% of children and adolescents are now experiencing, obesity. That's 26.2% of Hispanic children, 24.8% of non-Hispanic Black children, 16% non-Hispanic white, and 9% of non-Hispanic Asian children. So the numbers here tip, definitely affecting potentially low income, but minority children more than others who typically can have less access to healthcare, to fresh foods in their local communities, and less access to the information that's needed to be able to do something about this. And when somebody is nutrient deficient, whether they are obese or bulimic, right, their hormonal system, like you're saying, Michelle, shuts down. And I, for instance, had a classmate in high school that was anemic and bulimic. So it was on the other side of the spectrum, but she stopped having her period, right? Her hormones stopped working. And that affects, their depression, their ability to learn, their behavior. And I'm guessing the same thing could happen with somebody who's obese. You're shutting down their appetite. They're not getting nutrients, right? If they're not eating as much, they need those nutrients for their hormonal system to be working, is what you're saying.
Just for Zen, just for everything to be working. And, this may be, we can talk about, let's just sidebar to this mental health issue, because it's a massive issue right now in children and adults. Probably about half of children are, and teens especially, have a mental health issue right now. And of course, many of these kids prescribed pharmaceuticals. And as we know, we can just get into pharma, because we kind of did some pharma bashing last episode. When we tackled pharma in our last episode for folks, episode 4. But we know that many of these pharmaceutical drugs cause weight gain. Many of the psych medications and the antidepressants cause weight gain. And then we get to the kids are overweight. They have developed low self-esteem. There's the shame and blame game. They're made fun of at school. So you can see how this becomes self-perpetuating. And it's not just the commonly prescribed psychiatric medications. Many of them can cause weight gain as a side effect of drugs, except for the ADHD drugs where you lose weight. But so pharma has kids on these drugs. Prozac is being given out like candy, and kids gain weight. So at some point, unless anybody wants to add, I would love to pivot over the ABCs of EDCs and we'll get back to those obesogens at some point, unless everybody wants to add on some comments before we kind of shift gears into.
Well, can we just look at that? Can we look at that one chart that you brought up, Michelle, before the show? The graph 1 on looking at what it looks like around the world.
Yeah.
Let's look at look at the United States, folks. These are our medical costs, right? And rate of obesity. This is the rate of obesity, right, yeah. Michelle?
Yes, correct. You're so right, Zen. That is
might as well be medical costs too, though. We're the highest.
I know, it's quite
spend the most money.
The more you spend on medicine, the fatter you get.
You spend billions of dollars per year on obesity. It's actually shocking. And you can see the U.S. taking the charge, and whoever's adopting our eating patterns, they're like trailing right behind us in the obesity patterns. With Korea at the bottom, well, what the heck are the Koreans doing? So let's look at that. And that's significant because we have exported our eating patterns to every country around the world.
So I want to talk before we go on about the bypass surgery, because that's also ties into this drug. I think it's quite interesting that, so they've recommended bypass surgery, right, for 12-year-olds. That's a new thing now. And that's so disturbing to think of having that kind of disruption of your stomach at such an early age, because it's a gastric bypass shrinks the stomach into a tiny piece of itself that's still functioning. And it causes a lot of problems with absorption. You get B12 issues. You can't absorb your vitamins. You get a lot of deficiencies that you can't fix by just taking an excess dose of this thing, because it won't absorb. And of course, B12 deficiency is a huge problem with lots of possibilities. But also what's interesting to me, and I just learned this recently, is that the bypass surgery can cause the acid reflux. Acid reflux is a very common side effect of bypass surgery, which is also called GERD, gastric esophageal reflux syndrome, disease, disorder. Thank you. Esophageal reflux disorder, GERD, which is becoming more and more common. But is it something like 20% of the people who get the bypass surgery suffer from GERD, and then they'll get put on a PPI, a proton pump inhibitor. That's a very common drug, like Nexium, and what's the other one? Prilosec, Nexium and Prilosec. Those are very popular drugs to deal with acid reflux, which is a very uncomfortable condition where you're constantly burping up acid, and it can destroy your esophagus as well. So it's important to treat. And so these PPIs actually raise the pH of the stomach, make it not as acidic as it should be for proper digestion of the food. So that causes issues in terms of digestion, but that also has issues in terms of this hormone that Wegovy is replacing, because that hormone is triggered by acid. So when there's not enough acid in the stomach, that hormone goes down. And when that hormone goes down, you have increased appetite. So you're in a situation with this tiny stomach, and you're hungry, and your stomach can't handle all that food load. It's quite a mess. And then of course you could be put on Wegovy because, you don't have enough GLP-1. Let's give you Wegovy after your bypass surgery. That's what I'm guessing is going to happen, right? Because these people are going to be deficient in that protein if they have this problem with the acid reflux and get on the PPI. So it's like a really complicated cascade of events that cause you to get into a really bad place by the time you're done.
And guess what? Bypass surgery on the gastric bypass surgery costs $50,000. So you got 19 million children times $50,000. I don't know. It's 11 zeros after that. I don't know if that's billion or trillion, but that's a lot of money. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
And then on top of that, $1,300 a month for the for the other drug, drug, Wegovy.
And we have one of our listeners who knows more than the American Academy of Pediatrics. Yes, indeed. Thank you, CJ. We're on board with you. And what's also interesting is that when adults have had that bypass surgery and they're discharged, from the hospital, their surgery, they're not sent home on digestive enzymes. Many of them, including children, and in that study, funded by industry, Novo Nordisk. The studies were industry studies. They get gallstones because they're not given digestive enzymes to help break down fat. So they need to be sent home and at least bile salts. And they're not, because I took care of some of these adults post gastric surgery with issues. So it's sloppy. Even for those people who have had bariatric surgery, have done well, the post-management care is sloppy. And the physicians, shame on you guys, here's more shame and blame, I'm pointing my little finger, they're not taking care of these people adequately. And so this is just bad news for kids, just bad news. There's no world for it, just get rid of it. And let's get down to the real root causes, the multifactorial real root causes.
Yeah, and the food isn't the whole problem, right? So we're about to go into the whole discussion about the endocrine-disrupting chemicals. So if you did this $50,000 surgery that has all of these complications, it puts you on a lifetime prescription drug use, and then you're still exposed to chemicals that have obesogenic effects. So it seems like it's not really a solution-oriented way of dealing with things. It's like, let's just create more problems that can make more money for the pharmaceutical industry. So are we ready to go into endocrine-disrupting chemicals?
Oh, plow ahead. Yep.
All right. Dr. Pero, take us there.
Well, I had to go back and research obesogens because I love that word, or these chemicals. They're called endocrine-disrupting chemicals. And I thought, wait a minute, I've been using that word loosely. Where did it come from? Well, I had to go look it up. And two scientists, Grun and Blumberg, published a paper on these environmental obesogens, and it looks like 2006. And they talked about how these chemicals change receptors, and they can actually activate them or inhibit them. The endocrine system is a little bit tricky and it's a little complicated. It works at very low doses, and depending on the dose, different receptors on cells where things bind can either be stimulated or blocked. So it goes both ways. We now know there are thousands of environmental toxicants, but there are some main ones that act as endocrine disruptors and are responsible for this obesity issue. And the biggest ones come from phthalates and PBAs. And those are common in plastics, drinking cups, children's toys, fragrances, toothpaste. They're ubiquitous. And now they put them in very small doses so they get into all of our cells. And we know that those chemicals can disrupt our hormone systems in very profound ways. And let's see, I think I would also be remiss if I didn't mention PFAS, the forever chemicals. That's Teflon. Thank you, DuPont, and I think we're all probably positive because you don't really get rid of it from PFAS. Also an endocrine disruptor. And many of these chemicals also are carcinogenic, cause cancers. Many of the chemicals, especially the phthalates, and they put these chemicals in fragrances and a lot of personal care products. They call those the everywhere chemicals because they are everywhere. And they are really linked to issues around puberty and reproduction, lower sperm counts in men, lower testosterone levels in boys, etc. So they are endocrine disruptors. And if you can actually test people for these chemicals, and I'll let my colleagues and friends jump on into this conversation, please.
Can I just add in about parabens too? The reason why I found out about any type of chemicals or started reading labels at all was because my friend's mother died at 57 years old from lymphatic cancer. And I was like, where is she getting, why? She's 57. And she said, from toxins in the environment. I'm like, what do you mean? What, like where? And she said, well, like body care products like shampoos and lotions, they have parabens in them. Parabens are endocrine disrupting chemicals. The first time I'd ever heard those words. And she said they mess with the hormones and they can get, like in your lymph nodes and all that and cause cancer. So I started looking that up. And I just so happened, maybe it was around the same week, I saw an article in the LA Times about fish off the coast of Malibu that were being tested by scientists or biologists, just regular, testing just to check up on the fish. And half of those fish were hermaphrodites. The male fish had grown ovaries. And they specifically blamed parabens and toxins from pollution, parabens coming from the sunscreen that most people just slather on their kids and that are endocrine disrupting chemicals. And of course, toxicants from, from pollution and things like that. But the parabens specifically were shown to develop body fat in boys and breasts. And so as a mother with a small baby, that's what set me off on looking at parabens and reading labels and being like, what kind of endocrine disrupting chemicals are is my son being subjected to? And that's what set me down the rabbit. And I actually, created Moms Across America 7 years after that. But that's what started me down that pathway. And there's so many chemicals that are endocrine disrupting. I think it's 1,200. Do you know? Is it in the United States? And I think it's only 3 in Europe that are allowed.
Absolutely. And you're spot on. And not to mention, also in breast cancer tissue, they found high levels of parabens in breast cancer tissue biopsies. So, and breasts are hormone sensitive tissue, breast and prostate. And we know how high rates of prostate and breast cancer are in the US right now. So these chemicals are they're endocrine disruptors and carcinogens. So, and they are ubiquitous, and these microplastics are in our fish. They're in our water. And I would be remiss and if I didn't talk about biosludge. I love talking about biosludge. And that's it. And until 1986, the solution to pollution was dilution. We dumped in the ocean. And then we said, oh, wait, we can't dump in the ocean. The ocean is not a dumping ground. Let's take all this waste material. We dilute it down into our wastewater. We take that material that's incompletely broken down and we use it as fertilizer. So all that gunk, and if you ever saw fields being applied with biosludge, watch the movie Biosludge, it's like a horror film. You would see this stuff being applied. It smells like terrible when they're applying it, and it's in our food. So
and I think it's not allowed in organic food. Am I right?
Not in organic food. No biosludge.
Yeah, I just want to make that point. That's another reason to eat organic.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. So if you don't eat organic, you're going to be eating biosludge. Not to mention, pharmaceuticals in very small doses, like birth control pills, are not filtered out of that biosludge. So we're eating all that stuff with small doses of hormones, in addition from birth control pills, and so many women are on birth control pills. Yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, this is a problem. Yet another reason why you have to do your best to eat organic.
Yeah, it's a good point about, the waste, human waste is loaded with all the drugs that people are taking. It's pretty just sobering because a lot of them don't get broken down by the body. And I remember reading about metformin. I was really surprised because they singled out metformin as being really bad on the fish. And I think actually causing this hermaphrodite problem in the fish. Metformin is the drug that people are taking for diabetes. And it looks like a pretty good drug, actually. And lots of people are taking it to help with control their blood sugar. But it doesn't get broken down by the body. It ends up, it lasts a long time. And then the fish get exposed to it, and it's a hormone. It's an endocrine disruptor for the fish. So, I mean, it's just, you think about all these chemicals that people are taking. If they're being treated with cancer, they're taking all these really toxic chemicals to treat the cancer. And those are ending up.
Chemicals going into the ocean from our sewage and from the off run of, from industry. And then we have a picture of the plastics that are going into the ocean because of our trash, right? So I think Corey can show that image of the beach.
Yeah, and while Corey's bringing, I have to talk about what a great show this is. Here's a plug for the new MDs. Yep. Corey, our producer, is back there saying, hey, don't forget to tell our folks about fasting. And I said, you got it, Corey. I've got to mention fasting as a solution. Fasting is a great way to jumpstart your body because when you fast, by the way, you increase your stem cells. And so we can use it to jumpstart our metabolism, increase our stem cells. And it's even good for COVID. So Corey,
and it also gets you to clear out your garbage because your body has to get its resources from the junk that's in the cells, and so it can get rid of toxic metabolites that are produced just from living. oxidation damage and whatnot.
Many ways to healthy fast. So, you can talk to a practitioner if you have some health challenges before you do a fast. But even something called intermittent fasting is beneficial, where you fast for at least 12 hours, preferably 16. So you don't have to go on a 7-day fast. Although so many cultures around the world do incorporate fasting into their culture.
It's often part of a religion, which I find quite interesting. And I've wondered whether that's a consequence of sort of the realization that fasting is good for you, that they kind of made it be part of the religious ceremony.
Well, let's get back to that beach image, because this is the picture from around the world. And this is what we've done to our beautiful landscapes. And, it's not just sitting there. That plastic breaks down. It's in the sand. The dogs are in it. The kids are playing in it. And then it's in the water, not to mention all the crustaceans and other organisms that live in the sand. So this is just something, and this is human caused.
And I want to mention, I found a list of common sources of the microplastics. These are really tiny plastics, and they're very bad as endocrine disruptors. And on the web, I found a place where they listed some of the very common sources. It's quite an interesting list. I'll just read it off. Tires, synthetic clothing. So a lot of the clothes that you buy that are not natural. Tennis balls, laundry and dishwasher pods and tablets. Those little things you stick into the dishwasher? Microplastics. Cigarette butts, glitter, just sort of decorative. Wet wipes, tea bags, and plastic bottles. That's just a list that I found on the web of sources of microplastics. It's just incredible to think of how much of that is out there. We don't think anything of it in our environment.
Yeah, what bothers me is that people that are overweight and who are doing the best they can with eating foods, and some people may be having tea on a regular basis, and they're ingesting from their tea bags millions of little particles of estrogenic and obesogenic chemicals, and they think they're doing a good job. And yet they're 40 pounds overweight and they feel badly about themselves. They don't go out. They don't try to meet somebody. They don't have a good, social life. And that depression, that's what really bothers me, is that these companies that are not being responsible for their products, and they're not putting out things that are not just environmentally friendly, but are hormonally friendly, right? Human body friendly. These are not human body friendly products. They then benefit because people then go get a depression drug, right? And it's a vicious cycle, and they get to profit from both ends of it. And that just really makes me mad. I know some people are not for government regulations, but in this case, in making products, I think government regulation is really important, and the government needs to get on top of it more and more.
And this is a sidebar to what we talked about in the first new MDs, is regarding your amazing study from Moms Across America with heavy metals in lunches. Heavy metals were found in the study, that your group did, in all of the school lunches, 100% of them. So your kids eating that every single day at school. Heavy metals also contribute to obesity. And we will give you some links after the show. They will be up on RHI, an article with all these links, by the way. So in case you don't get notes, or you want to say, what are those gals talking about? We will have links to this show. But I love CJ Finley up here. Thank you, CJ.
Yes.
Very involved.
Organic. Yes.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
And confirming and reaffirming what indeed we're talking about. People out there, our eaters, our listeners, have switched to organic and they're feeling great. So right on. Good work.
Yes. Yeah. And the tea bags, can we just mention
Have
again?
the same plastic. That's a good point.
Tea bags have plastic. Yeah. So you want to get the tea bags that aren't plastic, or just buy whole leaf tea with a little strainer and just use that, metal.
I think that makes so much more sense.
Whole leaf
to
tea.
buy the pile of, just,
make sure it's
don't
organic.
bother with the bag.
Yeah. Organic whole leaf tea would be the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we should get into some solutions for people, because otherwise we're going to have the new MDs doom and gloom show, because this is so overwhelming. It's like, people's like, what do we do? Chemical overload. How do we protect our children? How do we protect ourselves? How do you protect your dog? And it is possible. Is this a good point in getting into that? What y'all feel about that?
I'm really excited about.
But before we move on to that, can we just read the other prescription drugs that have obesity as a side effect? I just want to add.
Causing. Oh, I can give a list here. You have it. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Antidepressants, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, steroids, diabetes medications. Who would have thought diabetes medications would add to obesity? Hormonal contraceptives such as birth control pills, and high blood pressure medications. Most people, I do not think know this, that if they're going to go on a high blood pressure medication, it's going to contribute to obesity.
Mm.
Yeah. So
And they're on it like every day for the rest of their lives.
Right.
It's once the people get on these drugs, they often don't get off
I
these drugs.
know. There's so many of these drugs that old people are taking every day. It's really amazing. Something for their blood
And young
pressure,
people.
something for their blood sugar,
Yeah.
statin drug for the cholesterol every day.
Yeah. All right. So just so that people know what those are, and then we can move on to solutions.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Pero, when, aesthetically, I think we're developing as a culture, we're more embracing and celebrating of a wide variety of body types. So that wouldn't be the reason to go into the doctor. Although we are concerned when we see kids who are overweight, because, we know that they're being set up for some health problems. So when you see your patients who want to address weight issues, what are the other things that they're there for? They're not just there for aesthetics.
Yeah. So let's be clear. It's this whole topic of obesity is not a benign subject. It's linked with other morbidities, even in children. Which ones? Cardiovascular disease, one. And cardiovascular disease can manifest early or later. Metabolic disorders like type 2 diabetes, super common. And there is even something called type 3 diabetes now. So that's another thing. Autoimmunity, for sure. And then mental health challenges. And obesity is also linked with other musculoskeletal issues. What do I mean by that? If you have an extra 10, 20, 40, 50 pounds on you, it will affect your joints, particularly your knees. And even small increases in weight will adversely affect your knees. And my gosh, walking through the airport recently, people very young in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, I thought, can anybody walk anymore? I saw a lot of people on the trams in wheelchairs, ambulating very slowly. And I thought, oh my gosh, I hear knee complaints endlessly, not to mention hips. And I don't have the stats today. Maybe we'll do it some other time. The number of younger and younger people coming up for knee and hip replacements, I find that very interesting. What that's all about is the joint replacement craze. I'm seeing people in the 50s having hip replacements.
Mm-hmm.
So there are disorders. And again, we mentioned the shaming and the blaming, and that's never a good thing. Children often tease at school. Older individuals may feel shamed by their weight. And fortunately, we are embracing people of all shapes and sizes now, which I think is wonderful. But we don't want to ignore the medical consequences of obesity. And so that is why we're here addressing these topics today. And not to shame people in that they're a different size. So that let's be clear about that. This is not shaming.
Yeah, we want to move from shame to solutions, right?
Yeah.
And identifying all the different things that could be causing or contributing to obesity, and supporting people to clean up their diets and their households and everything else, their lifestyle, to be able to move on and to be fit and healthy.
Yes. I'll answer one question here that comes from one of our listeners today about someone after learning about the Moms Across America a school lunch study, like, hey, now making school lunches, right on. Some healthy snacks. I'm going to share with you some of my favorite healthy snacks in children's school lunches. You cut up some veggies. It could be zucchini. It could be carrots. It could be celery, any veggies of your choice, and hummus, organic only, because
Yes.
only organic, because legumes are really high in Roundup or glyphosate-based herbicides. And hummus with some veggies. You give them some orange slices to go there. It's a great snack. And if you really want to give your kid a treat, I do popcorn. I have an air popper, garage sale, $2. Got one, and you can make little batches of air popcorn for your kids, and it's very affordable. Buying it organically is way cheaper, and popping it yourself than buying the pre-pop popcorn. And you can put it in your kid's little metal school lunchbox. You don't have to put it in a plastic bag, so you can put in your lunchbox. So that's just one suggestion.
And make sure you put some butter in there as well, because the butter is very healthy. Organic butter in your popcorn.
Organic butter, and then a little bit of hopefully Himalayan sea salt, and hopefully it doesn't have microplastics in it. But sometimes we know too much. I feel guilty, like, oh, I think I know too much. But
Yeah, one of my favorites is seaweed, the dried seaweed packets that you can get at Costco in the big bunches. But I am concerned, like, are there microplastics in there? Well, we need funding to do that testing, folks. If you want to support Moms Across America, we would love to do more testing. Like, for instance, this whole chicken feed thing that just happened with all kinds of, chickens not being able to lay eggs. If we had some money behind us, we'd be able to be on that and testing right away. But I hear Mike Adams is coming out with some test results on the chicken feed. I know I digress, but testing for things like microplastics and phthalates, which can be done now, and PFAS. It's very expensive. It's like $500 or $600 per test, but that type of testing, it's not being done by the government, obviously, right?
so here we are, moms having to take over to, do the testing ourselves once again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But no, dads, step up. Dads are getting in there doing the testing too. This is a call out for everybody to get involved. So should we get into some solutions for our listeners? And Alexis, if there are any questions, we can certainly address them. So I like to do phases of treatment and again, we are not giving medical advice here. Let's be clear. These are guidelines on optimizing your health. And so number one is we reduce the toxic load. If you don't reduce the toxic load, we can give the best recommendations. They're not going to work. It's like the goldfish bowl is dirty. I don't care how much more food you can put in there. You've got to clean the water, folks. And it's the same thing. If our plumbing is backed up, if the toxins are flowing out, you got to reduce the load. So that would be number one. And you give respite to the body's detox pathways. Number two is we heal the underlying gut issues, whatever those may be, that will accompany obesity. And that's usually leaky gut and not enough microbes. And we call that dysbiosis. So you've got to restore those microbes. And you say, well, how do I do that? Well, you got to eat fermented foods. And we'll let folks jump in here. Do you guys want to jump in on ferments? Because that is one of my favorite topics.
I had a chart for my kids and gave them gold stars. It only took about 2 or 3 weeks that I needed to do that. And after a while, they got accustomed to having sauerkraut with almost every dinner. So now they may not have it. Great. Yeah, maybe not with every dinner now, but they do have it a couple of times a week, and they love it. And there's about 1 trillion good bacteria in 1 tablespoon of sauerkraut. So you can really reset your microbiome and introduce in good probiotics in that. And there's all kinds of different probiotics: and apple cider vinegar, kombucha, sauerkraut, kefir, fermented vegetables, and they're different from pickles. Okay. We don't want just the pickles with vinegar. We want the fermented foods because they have thousands of different kinds of bacteria in our gut. Now we have, I'm sure Michelle could talk more about this, but we're supposed to have about 30,000 different kinds of bacteria, and the average American has 10,000. So folks,
we're really depleted.
A much better job of feeding our gut fermented foods for good bacteria.
And I would also say cheeses and sour cream, milk-based products, but sour cream and
raw and organic.
Raw organic sour cream, thank you. Yes, and organic blue cheese is one of my favorites. It's an acquired taste, but my whole family loves blue cheese, and except for my husband, he's Chinese and he hasn't quite adjusted to the blue cheese. But
for dinner, Stephanie. Well, I've been to your house for dinner. I want to come back. And I would like to do a shout out here to Organic Consumers Association, because they've been on the fermented bandwagon for a long time, but in an interesting way for animals, using fermented agave. And go on OCA's website to read about this, using it as forraje, which is these fermented leaves for feed for their animals who are chowing on it, thriving, and we're using something that used to be dumped, recycling. It's such a win-win project. So these things are going on for our animals, for ourselves. We live in a web. We're not undivided from our communities. And lastly is, and this is a good place that we can wrap up pretty soon, is you must weave in detoxification strategies. Mm-hmm. And I don't even think we plan to end here, because we're going to be talking about this on our next episode. But how to detox? Is there any bigger buzzword out there than the word detox? Because it's everywhere. And detox must be a part of changing our consumption, our diets, as we optimize our health. And you didn't hear us say weight loss, but we're talking about optimizing your health and how you do that. And as you optimize your diet and your detox and you offset the detoxification process, you will start to feel better, and your body's innate ability to heal itself will be recovered. So maybe I could open that to my buddies here, and if you want to chime in there, because I'm all over that detox stuff these days.
Can I add that I just learned that if you walk for an hour, so you don't even need to have a sauna, a red infrared sauna that costs thousands of dollars to detox. That does help, but you can, if you walk for an hour, you are flushing out your lymph nodes. So you're flushing out all those toxins that I just mentioned earlier that could cause, weight gain and cancer and all of that. So just getting out and walking out in nature is the best way to do it, and make some friends, get a dog, adopt a dog from a shelter, and then you have to get out and walk. And then you're meeting people too, and you're being more social and all of that. So that would be my number one.
And you're getting sunlight exposure, which I'm always wanting to put in there.
Stephanie. I can always count on you to bring in the importance of sunlight.
Also, it's free. Movement is free. And must I say that your lymph system, which is one of the systems that picks up a lot of these toxic materials that are coming through, the way your lymph system, which is kind of a subject that no one really talks about, is passive, meaning you don't have any valves in that system. It has, so the only way it moves material is through activity. We weren't designed to be sitting in front of our devices all day. We were designed to musculoskeletal move, dance, hike, whatever you like to do it. And so you must move. And even if moving is harder for you, because perhaps you have some movement challenges, you start slow and build up. You get better at it. So everyone go out there, get off your devices, move, and drink a lot of filtered water.
And if you live near the ocean, take the walk on the beach in the water, get good grounding on top of everything else.
Barefoot, yes. Barefoot
in the water.
The best, yes.
And we didn't say barefoot and pregnant. We said barefoot in the water.
Yes. If you want to do that while you're pregnant too, that would be great grounding.
That would be really good for the baby.
You need those electrons. It's forest bathing. It's ocean walking. It's getting it where you can go hug a tree. It's Valentine's Day, and reground yourself, especially from the overload of electromagnetic frequencies, which I think is going to be episode 7 and just giving.
Yes, pretty soon. Electromagnetic frequencies will come out. But before we go, I only have a couple of minutes left. What do you think? When I mentioned that I went gluten-free and no exercise in 6 weeks, I lost. Yeah, was it 6 weeks? I lost 16 pounds. Where do you stand, Michelle or Stephanie, on the gluten-free thing?
Inflammation, baby. It's inflammation. So a lot of those foods are inflammatory, and you can tell when people have inflammation. They tend to like, for example, those side saddles on people's thighs. That's all often inflammatory fat. And so you cut out those inflammatory foods, especially if you have leaky gut. Oftentimes the fat will go down because your chronic inflammatory state goes down. So the big inflammatory foods are gluten and dairy for most of us. And you can come off of those as we switch to plant-forward diets, organic plant-forward diets, and you can sort of sometimes see weight come down. And so, especially with your meat, if you do eat meat and it's not organic, those animals are fed horrific diets and treated poorly. And you're eating all the stuff they're eating, which is not good.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with carbs too, right? Carbs get vilified. For some people, they can eat them. Some people, they can't. I think it really depends on the type of carbs, wouldn't it? Like processed food carbs versus potatoes.
Organic versus not organic.
Yeah, and if you eat sweet potatoes and you could be eating a lot of heavy metals and toxins in those potatoes if they're not organic, right? So it really, there's just these nuances in the and different diets that are going on, keto and paleo and all these things that people aren't really discussing the fact whether or not those foods are organic or not. That's what really bothers
I think that's a huge part. And I think people are getting confused about this food being bad for you, not realizing it's not really that food that's bad for you. It's the chemicals that are in it. And if you could have an organic version of that food, it wouldn't be bad for you. I think that's true for a lot of foods.
Well, gals, I'm hearing episode 8 and we break down these diets for people: ketogenic, paleo, vegetarian.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from the listeners. If you have a comment, put it in the comment section. What would you like us to focus on in the coming shows? We're going to be doing detoxing. We're going to be doing wireless radiation and EMFs and all these different diets. Man, I'd love to get some input from people, these, the experts on the different diets, on why it works for some people and maybe why it doesn't for others.
And
yes, it's so complicated with the diets because you've got people who are extremely low fat and then people who are extremely high fat and people high protein. I mean, it's so confusing. You really don't know which way's up when you try to figure out what's the best thing to eat. It's so confusing.
So that would, I'd say we're into episode 8 or 9 by that point, and we can get into diets are one of my favorite topics. because people are individuals and you have to individualize their menu planning based on who they are, their health challenges, their ethnicity, where they live, their activities, their hobbies. And so you formulate diet plans with people based on all that. That is super individualized. There's no one size fits all when it comes to what to eat. But what we would say is eating an organic, plant forward, regen ag when possible.
Whole foods.
Avoid ultra process if you can. Foods is the best way to go.
Great.
All right.
We just lost Alexis, but okay.
She's back.
I think it's time
we
to
are
wrap
out
up.
of time.
Well, you all are the dream team. I feel so lucky to be part of this project because I get to learn all of this essential information that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. It's not something that you randomly Google and find out all of this stuff. It's so amazing that you all have lent your expertise to this project. So I look forward to the next episode.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Day.
Take care. Thanks, Ann and CJ, everybody.